In a world where women were rarely invited into scientific laboratories, Marie Curie didn't just walk in. She cracked open the doors and held them open for generations to come. With a mind forged in adversity and a spirit that refused to accept the status quo, she became the first woman to win a Nobel Prize, and then the first person to win two. Her life is not just a chronicle of scientific achievement. It's a story of immigration, of love and loss, of obsession with discovery, and of quiet, glowing courage. Marie Curie gave her life to science, literally. She's the woman who glowed in the dark. Born Maria Skłodowska on November 7, 1867, in Russian-occupied Warsaw, now Poland, she grew up in a family of educators, but despite their emphasis on learning, life wasn't easy. Poland was under the yoke of the Russian Empire, which meant Poles, especially girls, had limited access to education. Her mother died when Maria was just 10 years old. Her father, once a professor, lost his position due to anti-Russian sentiments. Poverty followed. And yet Maria excelled in school, driven by a fierce curiosity and a dream of something bigger. She was a girl who read Newton in secret, who joined the underground Flying University, an illegal institution that taught Polish youth forbidden subjects. She worked as a governess to support her sister's education, then returned to pursue her own. At the age of 24, she finally left Poland for the University of Paris, the Sorbonne, nearly starving herself to do it. She arrived with almost nothing, no money, no warm clothes and little fluency in French. But what she did have was genius. At the Sorbonne, Maria became Marie. She graduated first in her class in physics and then took up mathematics. It was during this time she met a man who would change her life, Pierre Curie, a fellow scientist known for his work in magnetism and crystallography. They married in 1895. Their wedding was famously modest. No church, no white dress, just two brilliant minds joining forces. Pierre introduced Marie to laboratory research, and soon the two became scientific collaborators. Their shared curiosity would lead them to one of the most significant scientific discoveries of the 20th century, radioactivity. In 1896, Henri Becquerel discovered that uranium salts emitted an invisible type of energy. Marie became fascinated. What was this strange radiation? Was it unique to uranium, or was something else at play? She began measuring the electric currents emitted by different minerals, using an electrometer her husband had invented. What she discovered was revolutionary. The atoms themselves were breaking apart. This contradicted the belief that atoms were indivisible. In 1898, the Curies discovered polonium, named after Marie's beloved Poland. A few months later, they isolated radium, far more radioactive than uranium. Their work proved that radioactivity was a property of matter itself. But isolating radium wasn't easy. It required processing tons of pitch-blende ore, often in cold, unventilated sheds. They crushed rocks, boiled them, evaporated acids, inhaling toxic fumes daily. Marie worked through sickness, exhaustion and motherhood. Her lab notebooks from that period are still radioactive today. In 1903, Marie and Pierre, along with Henri Becquerel, were awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics. Marie became the first woman ever to win the prize, but institutional sexism ran deep. When the Nobel Committee first considered awarding Pierre alone, he protested. It was Marie's idea, Marie's measurements. She had done more than half the work. The award brought them fame, but not fortune. The Curies refused to patent radium, believing science should belong to all. They gave lectures and struggled to fund their own research. Then, tragedy struck. In 1906, Pierre Curie was killed in a street accident, crushed by a horse-drawn carriage. Marie, devastated, returned to the lab just days after his funeral. She was appointed to his professorship at the Sorbonne, becoming the university's first female professor. She wore black every day for the rest of her life. After Pierre's death, Marie threw herself into her work. In 1911, she was awarded the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for her isolation of pure radium and polonium. She was now the first person in history to win 2 Nobel Prizes in 2 different sciences, but the press turned against her. Around the time of her second Nobel, journalists uncovered a brief affair she had with physicist Paul Langevin, a married man estranged from his wife. The story became a scandal. She was vilified in the French media as a foreign seductress. They called her an atheist, a homewrecker. Even Einstein came to her defense, writing, "If the rabble continues to occupy itself with you, simply don't read that hogwash. What you have accomplished will remain for eternity." Through it all, Marie stood firm. She refused to hide. She travelled to Stockholm to collect her prize in person, becoming a symbol of quiet defiance. By 1914, Curie had founded the Radium Institute in Paris, a centre for medical research and radiology. Then came World War I. As the French front lines turned into blood-soaked trenches, Curie recognised a new use for her discovery: X-ray imaging. She outfitted mobile units, known as Petites Curies, to bring radiology to the battlefield. She trained dozens of women, including her own daughter Irene, to operate them. Thanks to her work, countless soldiers survived injuries that would have otherwise been fatal. Yet she received no official recognition from the French government for her wartime service. In the 1920s, Marie's health began to deteriorate. She suffered from fatigue, cataracts, and constant pain. At the time, the effects of radiation were not fully understood. She had handled radium with bare hands, carried vials in her pockets, and stored radioactive materials in her desk drawer. To support her Radium Institute, she travelled to the United States in 1921 and again in 1929. American journalist Marie Maloney organised a fundraising campaign to purchase a gram of radium, worth $100,000 at the time, for her work. Curie, normally shy and austere, charmed American audiences. President Warren Harding presented her with the radium. Women's groups across the country celebrated her as a hero. But even as her fame grew, her body was fading. On July 4th, 1934, Marie Curie died of aplastic anemia, likely caused by years of radiation exposure. She was 66. She was buried next to Pierre Curie. But in 1995, the French government moved their remains to the Panthéon in Paris, the final resting place of France's greatest citizens. Marie Curie became the first woman ever to be interred there on her own merits. Even in death, she is radioactive. Her notebooks, clothes, and even furniture are still too dangerous to handle without protective gear. Marie Curie was more than just a scientist. She was a mother, an immigrant, a widow, and a pioneer. Her daughter, Irene Joliot-Curie, would go on to win a Nobel Prize herself, making them the only mother-daughter Nobel laureates in history. Her work laid the foundation for nuclear physics, cancer therapy, radiology, and quantum theory. She challenged not just scientific norms, but social expectations, proving that brilliance had no gender. Today there are schools, hospitals, research centres, and even an element on the periodic table, curium, named in her honour. She is proof that one woman, armed with intellect, grit, and a little radium, can change the world. Marie Curie lived and died for her science. She worked in freezing labs, defied governments, and outshone men in a male-dominated field. Not for glory, but because she believed in the power of knowledge. She chased the invisible, cracked the atom, and lit the path for every woman who dared to ask, "Why not me?" To this day, she remains one of the most searched, studied, and celebrated scientists in the world. And she glows, not just because of radiation, but because she was incandescent with purpose.